What would you do if your entitled HOA president's son smashed through your fence, then lied to the police and said you agreed to pay for it? I stayed quiet, because I knew something they didn't. And within minutes, his smirk vanished, along with his car. If you love stories where karma hits harder than a wrecking ball, subscribe and stay tuned, because this one gets wild. The afternoon it happened started as peacefully as any other Saturday in our quiet cul-de-sac, the kind of neighborhood where lawns were trimmed with ruler precision and the HOA newsletter felt more like a warning letter than a community update, and I was in my backyard staining the panels of the cedar fence I'd installed with my own hands just 6 months earlier when I heard the screech of tires followed by an explosive crack that shook the ground beneath my boots, and before I could even process the sound, half my brand new fence was splintered into jagged pieces and a silver BMW was sitting nose first in my yard like it had always belonged there, smoke curling from the hood, and stepping out of the driver's seat like he'd just parked at a mall was Tyler, Karen Widmore's 22-year-old son, home from college and already carrying himself like the neighborhood was beneath him, and instead of looking shaken or apologetic, he glanced at the damage, then at me, and actually laughed under his breath, as if crashing through someone's property was just another minor inconvenience in his privileged little world, and within seconds Karen herself came storming down the sidewalk in heels that clicked like gunshots, her pink blazer practically glowing with outrage, not at her son but at me, pointing a manicured finger in my direction and shouting, "This fence was too close to the property line. I told you this would happen," as if her son had been forced into my yard by faulty zoning, and I stood there stunned, holding my paintbrush, trying to decide whether I was in some kind of absurd reality show, but things escalated fast when Tyler pulled out his phone and muttered something to her before dialing 911, and I could clearly hear him telling the dispatcher, "Yeah, my car slid because of unsafe construction next door." The homeowner admitted he'd cover damages, and I actually felt my heartbeat in my throat because I had said no such thing, but Karen crossed her arms and gave me a tight smile that said she thought she'd already won, and when the police arrived minutes later, Tyler repeated the lie smoothly, claiming I'd apologized and agreed to handle the repairs privately, adding that my improper fence placement caused the accident, and Karen chimed in about HOA violations and how I'd ignored her warnings, painting me as some reckless neighbor who didn't follow community standards, and I watched the officers take notes while Tyler leaned casually against his car, confidence dripping from his expression, but here's what neither of them knew. My home security system had caught everything, from the moment his BMW sped into the cul-de-sac well above the posted limit to the exact second his tires locked because he'd been looking down at his phone instead of the road, and I didn't interrupt them while they spoke because sometimes the best move in chess is letting your opponent think they're dominating the board, and when one officer finally turned to me from my side, I calmly said, "Would you mind watching the footage?" And Karen scoffed loudly, accusing me of trying to intimidate her son. But 5 minutes later we were all standing in my living room staring at crystal clear video of Tyler accelerating toward the curve, glancing at his phone, overcorrecting, and plowing straight through my perfectly legal fence, and the silence that followed was almost poetic, but Tyler still tried to salvage his pride by muttering something about faulty brakes, which was when the second twist unfolded because the BMW wasn't even fully his, it was leased under Karen's name through a premium agreement that required immediate reporting of any reckless driving incidents. And as the officer stepped outside to inspect the car more closely, he noticed the expired registration tag and the fact that Tyler's license was under temporary suspension for a speeding ticket he'd failed to appear in court for, information that came back within minutes on the patrol car's computer, and suddenly that smug expression evaporated as the officer informed him he was driving on a suspended license and the vehicle would need to be impounded pending investigation, and Karen's confident posture cracked for the first time as she demanded they handle this reasonably. But policies are policies, and I watched from my porch as the tow truck arrived, lifting the BMW off the grass while neighbors peeked from behind curtains, and Tyler stood there speechless, hands shoved in his hoodie pocket, the same way he'd leaned against the car earlier but now without the arrogance, and Karen attempted one last maneuver by insisting the wall would find me for unsightly debris from the broken fence, but that's when I reminded her gently that HOA bylaws also penalized residents for property damage caused by household members. And since Tyler's accident was officially documented as reckless driving, the liability shifted squarely onto them, and what made it sweeter was that I happened to be a contractor with meticulous records, including survey documents proving my fence was installed exactly within property boundaries, documents I'd submitted to the HOA months earlier and which Karen herself had signed off on, and when the second officer handed Tyler a citation and informed him of the court date, Karen's face went pale because not only was her son facing fines and possible further suspension, but her insurance premiums were about to skyrocket, and the tow truck pulled away with the BMW dangling like a trophy of consequences, and Tyler glanced at me with a mixture of anger and disbelief, as if karma had betrayed him personally. But the story didn't end there, because 2 days later I received a formal letter from the HOA claiming I'd created a hazardous fence structure, clearly Karen's attempt at retaliation, and instead of reacting emotionally, I forwarded the letter along with the police report and video evidence to the HOA board members, yes, plural, because Karen wasn't the entire board, just its loudest voice, and what she hadn't anticipated was that several residents were already tired of her heavy-handed tactics, and once they saw proof that her son had lied to law enforcement and damaged another homeowner's property, sentiment shifted quickly, and within a week an emergency board meeting was called, one I attended calmly with printed documentation in hand, and as discussions unfolded it became clear this wasn't Karen's first instance of bending rules for personal convenience, but it was the first time someone had concrete evidence strong enough to challenge her authority, and the ultimate twist came when the board voted to temporarily suspend her presidency pending an ethics review, citing conflict of interest and misuse of HOA communication channels, and as she exited the clubhouse that evening, heels striking pavement with far less confidence than before, she avoided eye contact entirely, and I realized something important. People like Karen rely on intimidation and assumption that others won't push back, but the moment someone does, with facts instead of fury, their entire strategy collapses, and over the next month Tyler was ordered to pay full restitution for the fence replacement, plus court fines, and community service hours that ironically included assisting with neighborhood maintenance projects, which meant more than once I saw him picking up trash along the same sidewalk where he'd once smirked, and though he never apologized outright, the absence of arrogance was apology enough, and my new fence went up stronger than before, reinforced posts sunk deeper into concrete not just structurally but symbolically, because it represented boundaries, legal, personal, and moral. And sometimes the loudest victory isn't shouting back but standing firm while truth does the work, and every time I see that stretch of lawn now, I don't think about the crash but about the lesson etched into the memory of this neighborhood. Actions have consequences, lies unravel under evidence, and when someone tells the police you'll pay for something you didn't do, make sure you have cameras, and patience, because minutes later, the only thing disappearing might be their car.